and reloaders and 3 circles, passengers and members. It's Fortune Cookie 45LC coming to you from the Hot Lead Zone Express up here in the Kitsap County area of Washington State. This is the RCBS Turret Press. Now when you hear about turret presses, you automatically think about Lee turret presses and Redding T7s, but the RCBS wouldn't be your first one that would come to mind, because if you do a search on YouTube on turret presses, you'll get a ton of them on the Lee turret press and a half ton on the Redding T7, but just a smidgen of videos on the RCBS turret press. It's a nice press. Let's go ahead and give you a look at this. I went ahead and got the inline fabrication mounting plate for it for the elevated inline precision universal mount here. And so you see it's all set up nicely. Plus with the ergonomic handle from inline fabrication, we're looking at a very nice setup here. The ergonomic handle is really a pleasure to activate. Press has very smooth action and the turret rotates nicely, but one of the things that we see right away is that there's a problem in that when you try to rotate the turret to a certain point, it runs into the primer tube. And if you come over to this side, it runs into the operating handle. So you can only actually operate the turret adjustment over about 120 degrees. And RCBS is only given 2 holes for the handle. The handle has no detent, so it just slips into a hole and it can fall right out. It's only held in the hole by about a ½ inch of engagement, but it hasn't fallen out yet, so unless you hit that or something, it seems like it's okay. But you can't operate it from this side because it doesn't have much throw at all, and because there are only 2 mounting holes, you don't have a lot of flexibility where you put the handle for the turret. It'd be a lot nicer if they gave you 120 degrees 3 holes. And the 6 stations are not as many as the T7 from Redding or the Lyman All-American 8 turret press, which has 8 stations. So this only has 6, and the advantage of 6 is that it's a more compact head here. So if you wanted to go ahead and get extra heads, they're smaller. They're like $70 a head though, so you kind of have to pay quite a bit to get the advantage of having different heads to put on. But then again, all the heads for the turrets like this press are on the expensive side. This press is selling for around $380 from our normal online outlets, and you won't see this press at any local stores. Now the press comes fully assembled except for the primer system. You have to more or less put that together, but it's very simple. This module here is all in one, and these primer tubes simply screw in. This mounts by 2 bolts here, and that's all it is. You don't even need to follow instructions to figure out how to put this together. So anyway, this is how the primer system works, of course. You go ahead and pick up a primer like this after you fill the tube in there, and then it goes in. You prime, you see how it's coming through? You prime, and then it pops back out to get another primer when you go like this. The problem with the primer system is that it gets in the way of all this nice access that we have. It really gets in the way of trying to get in here, and And then if you want stage cases on the inline mount or this flat area, it's very hard with this primer system in the way. The way I like to reload, this primer system is actually in the way, and I prefer not to even use it. But to take it off is simple. Two screws, loosen these bolts, and the thing comes right off. So no problem there. Now the dead primer catching system, instead of going through the RAM and dropping out the bottom for the dead primers, very nice way to handle dead primers, it actually funnels the dead primers out the side into this little plastic kind of a cheapy catcher. And you put that on there, and it actually is in the way of all this nice access too. So this area here is very busy when you have the dead primer catcher and the primer system all kind of occupying space in this access area. So there's three ways you can use this press. One is a multi-mounted dies in the turret, but operated like a single stage press where you do a lot of batches of procedures on numerous cases at once, and then shift to the next die and run that procedure on your batch. So basically you're doing it like a single stage press. It's just that all your dies are at instant disposal for use. The second way that you would use this press would be as kind of like a semi-progressive, where you would go ahead and basically do everything with the case in the press without having to take the case out of the press until the round is done. So the way you would do that would be you go ahead and resize, deprime, and prime on one station. Then you would go to the next station and neck expand mouth flare, and then add your powder charge. So you could do that simply with a powder through die. Then you would go ahead and rotate over to your bullet seating. You put a bullet on top, seat the bullet, and then you would go ahead and crimp and do it all. You wouldn't take the case out until you got a completed round. So that would be another way to do it. And then the third way to use this press would be kind of a conglomeration of the two, where you would go ahead and deprime, resize, and prime, and then roll over to the next die, which is the mouth flare and neck expand. Then you would take the case and put it in a reloading block and go ahead and measure powder in all your cases and check the powder level, all that kind of thing, and then bring it back in to do a bullet seat, and then roll it over and do a crimp. And then you'd have a loaded round, and you only had to take the case out of the press once to do that. So those are the three ways you would use this press. Well, you see, I went ahead and took the primer system off, and as you see, I'm a lot happier with the access that I have. Even with the dead primer catcher, it's not in the way as long as the primer system's not in the way. By the way, the primer system, when you have 100 primers loaded into the tube here, there's no follower that is provided where you can see the rod dropping down and you can see how many primers are left. So that's kind of a little bit of an omission. I would think that having a primer follower would help the feed of the primers, as well as indicating how many primers are left. At any rate, if you use a system like this, you would go ahead and load a certain number of cases. Like every 100 primers, you're going to finish loading 100, because you don't want to leave primers in this tube. You can't get them out easily. You might as well go ahead and load that many. Now, of course, once your depriming is done, you can take this thing off, and then you have the benefit of having a wide open shell station here, which is one of the big advantages of a turret press. Lots of access. Now, worthy to note that this press is a stop-to-stop press because this lower toggle, floating toggle, and by the way, RCBS gives you a very quality part down here. This is a solid piece of cast iron. There's no cutouts underneath. So this is rugged. And it's got a stop here so that when you reach the bottom, it hits the stop. It's a dead stop. This press is not a cam over press. It's dead stop, and then at the top of the stroke, the toggle hits the ram right here and stops it. So it's a stop-to-stop press. Nothing wrong with that. That's the tendency of presses to be designed now, stop-to-stop. They're not cam overs. If you go ahead and reach the bottom stop and then you crank the die a little bit, you're not getting cam over, you're just taking out any slack in the system. Now, one thing that RCBS has been doing is going to a Zerk fitting to allow us to grease the ram. And this press was obviously designed before RCBS started to apply the Zerk system that they have in their presses now, the more recent designs. So no Zerk system, but then again, what's wrong with just applying a little bit of oil to the ram and working it in? That's been good for decades, and it should be good in the future as well. Now, worthy to note also that this entire plate here at the bottom is also solid cast iron. And the ram track is this whole part right here. This whole distance is a ram track inside. So you've got plenty of ram support, and that's something we always look for in these kind of presses. Now notice, just as all of presses of this design, there's a brace in the back to keep the platform from tilting as you put stress on it. So this section back here supports the back of the turret, the back half of the turret, so when we stress this part out, there's a lot of resistance to any flexure. So that's good. So shooters and reloaders out there, 3 Circles passengers and members, if you're in the market for a turret type press, this RCBS offering is worth consideration, and it's actually very joyful action to use. I'm going to look forward to using this to do a few reloading projects coming up. Take care. We'll see you next video.